Single dad and daughter find a dying woman in the woods. What happened next shocked everyone. The scream was so faint that at first it sounded like the wind weaving through the tall pines. But when it came again, sharper, desperate, and trembling, Oliver's heart froze mid-step. His 9-year-old daughter, Juniper, standing a few feet ahead on the narrow forest trail, turned back with wide eyes that mirrored the same chill climbing up her father's spine. Morning sunlight spilled through the trees in soft patches, lighting the moss and fallen leaves in gentle gold. But that sound didn't belong in daylight, didn't belong in the quiet woods they had walked through hundreds of times. Oliver felt something deep inside him shift, an instinct, a warning, a pull toward someone who needed help. He stepped forward, one hand raised for Juniper to stay behind him. But the moment the scream cracked through the air a third time, the two of them ran together. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and humanity stepping forward when it matters most, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Touch of Kindness Stories. Your support helps these emotional stories reach more hearts. Oliver felt his breath catch as he followed the sound down a slope off the main trail, brushing aside branches and stepping over fallen logs. The forest was peaceful in a way that made the cry feel even more unnatural. When he finally stumbled into a small clearing, the sight made his chest tighten. A woman lay on her side in the shade of a twisted oak, her clothes torn and dusted with dirt, her face pale and streaked with sweat. She was barely conscious, her lips moving weakly as if forming words no one could hear. Juniper gasped, clinging to her father's sleeve, her small voice cracking as she whispered that they needed to help her. It was the kind of moment that erased every other thought from Oliver's mind. He knelt beside the woman, noticing bruises on her arms and a gash on her forehead. She looked like she had been crawling before collapsing. He tried to speak to her softly, to reassure her that she wasn't alone, but her eyes flickered only slightly, as if she were somewhere between waking and slipping away entirely. Oliver quickly took out his phone, but the forest's tall trees swallowed the signal whole. No bars, not a single flicker of reception. Panic threatened to rise inside him, but years of being a single father had taught him that fear had to wait when someone needed strength. He told Juniper to stay close, then carefully lifted the woman's head onto a folded jacket, giving her what little comfort he could. The morning breeze was cool, and he could see her shivering. He removed his own hoodie and placed it over her, hoping to keep her warm until he could get help. Juniper, trembling but determined, held the woman's hand, whispering small words of comfort that hinted at the innocent courage only children seem to possess. Oliver studied the woman's breathing, weak, uneven, dangerously fragile. He knew the nearest ranger station was several miles away, too far to run, without risking losing time she didn't have. The only option was to carry her, no matter how hard the terrain. That he gathered her into his arms carefully, trying not to worsen her injuries. Her weight felt both heavy and frighteningly light at the same time. Juniper walked next to him, steadying branches away from his path as he climbed the slope back toward the trail. Every few steps, he felt the woman's breath stutter against his chest, each time filling him with dread. The forest seemed endless, and the more he moved, the more aware he became of the silence pressing in on them. Every now and then, a bird would chirp or leaves would rustle, but it all felt distant, as if the world were holding its breath along with him. Oliver fought to keep his pace steady. His muscles burned, sweat dripped down his forehead, and memories he had long buried began surfacing. Memories of the night Juniper's mother, Mia, had collapsed in his arms from a sudden heart condition they never saw coming. The panic in his chest now felt eerily familiar. He whispered to himself that he wouldn't lose another person. Not like this. Not again. He tightened his grip on the woman, forcing his legs to keep moving. Juniper kept telling him he could do it, her young voice serving as an anchor pulling him through each step. When they reached the main trail, Oliver shifted the woman in his arms, trying to relieve the strain on his shoulders. He told Juniper to run ahead to the entrance where other hikers sometimes passed through, hoping desperately that someone else would be nearby. Juniper sprinted with all the speed her small legs could muster, calling out for help as she disappeared around a bend. Oliver kept moving, every heartbeat echoing like a countdown. The sunlight grew stronger, the trees thinning as the trail approached the clearing near the parking area. Sweat soaked through his shirt, but he didn't stop. Suddenly, he heard voices, Juniper's panic calls mixing with startled responses. When Oliver emerged into the clearing, 2 hikers rushed toward him, their concern immediate when they saw the woman in his arms. One grabbed a phone and dialed emergency services. The other spread out a blanket near a picnic bench where Oliver could gently lower her. The woman still hadn't said a word, her breath shallow, but her eyelashes fluttered when Juniper knelt beside her again. Oliver brushed a leaf from her forehead, whispering that help was coming. He watched for any sign of response. For a brief moment, her fingers curled weakly around Juniper's hand, a fragile thread of connection that made Oliver's throat tighten. The ambulance arrived within minutes, though to Oliver it felt like the longest stretch of time in his life. Paramedics rushed forward, checking vitals and stabilizing her injuries. They asked him what happened, but Oliver could only tell them what little he knew, that they found her, that she was alone, that she needed help. They loaded her into the ambulance, and as they closed the doors, the woman opened her eyes. They were barely open, but for the first time, she seemed aware. She looked directly at Oliver and Juniper, her lips parting as if trying to speak. But the words never came. The ambulance pulled away, leaving Oliver standing in the sunlight, his daughter quietly holding his hand. The next few days were a blur of worry and unanswered questions. Oliver couldn't stop thinking about the woman. He and Juniper visited the hospital, but at first the staff didn't know her name. She carried no ID, and her injuries suggested she had been wandering or lost for hours, maybe days. Oliver felt responsible, as if fate had placed her in his path for a reason he didn't yet understand. Juniper prayed for her every night, asking for the woman to wake up, asking for her to be able to smile again someday. And Oliver, though he wasn't the praying type, found himself quietly hoping too. On the fourth day, the hospital called. They told him the woman had regained full consciousness and had asked to meet the man and child who had saved her life. Oliver and Juniper arrived just after noon, sunlight streaming through the hospital windows as they stepped into the quiet room where she rested. The woman, now cleaner and wearing a fresh gown, looked fragile but alive in a way that filled Oliver with relief, so powerful he felt weak. Her name, they learned, was Arya Whitlock. She had been missing for 3 days after her car had skidded off a rural road deep in the woods. She had crawled out of the wreckage but became lost and increasingly injured as she tried to find help. She remembered almost nothing after the first night, only pain, cold, and a blur of voices she thought might have been dreams. Arya reached for Oliver's hand with trembling fingers, tears welling as she tried to express her gratitude. She told him that she had thought she was hallucinating when she heard Juniper's soft voice or felt a warm jacket placed over her. She admitted she had been ready to give up, but something, maybe fate, maybe luck, maybe something she didn't fully understand, had kept her alive long enough for them to find her. Oliver assured her that anyone would have done the same, though deep down he knew that wasn't entirely true. Some people would have ignored the sound. Some would have dismissed it as an animal or imagined it. But he couldn't tell her that. He just squeezed her hand gently and told her to focus on healing. Juniper climbed onto the chair beside her bed and gave Arya a small handmade card she had drawn, filled with scribbled sunshine, trees, and a stick figure family holding hands. Arya cried when she saw it, pressing it against her heart as though it were the most precious thing anyone had ever given her. In the days that followed, Oliver and Juniper continued to visit her, bringing flowers, books, and stories to brighten the sterile hospital room. Arya had no family nearby. She had moved to the area only months before for a new job, still trying to build a life after leaving behind a difficult past. She shared bits of her story with Oliver, not all at once, but in gentle pieces, as someone who rarely felt safe opening up. Oliver understood that vulnerability too. They were both people carrying invisible burdens, quietly learning to trust again. As Arya recovered, a bond formed between the three of them, slow, organic, and filled with the kind of warmth that comes from shared hardship. The more time they spent together, the more Oliver felt something shifting inside him. He noticed how Juniper's eyes lit up whenever Arya smiled, how the woman's presence softened the edges of his own grief he thought would never fade. There was something healing in the way Arya spoke, in the way she listened, in her quiet strength that had survived those dark days alone in the woods. There was a sense of second